Hey, Robbins here, and welcome to another session of the Technology Marketing Toolkit. And in this session, we're going to talk about adding telemarketing to your marketing arsenal so that you can generate appointments and improve your marketing results across all media, and of course to build your list. So in this session, what we're going to be talking about specifically is, again, how to use telemarketing to double or triple the response that you're getting from all of the marketing campaigns that you're currently running. And I'm going to tell you this right now, whether it's email or trade shows or direct mail or any kind of prospecting you're doing, if you will layer on follow-up calls with telemarketing, I very frequently see it double or triple the response that you're going to get, because when you send out a marketing campaign, many people think, well, they got it and they saw it, but people are extremely busy. And so you got to use telemarketing as a way of following up with people to get them to act on the offer. Often people are very interested, but they're just busy. So telemarketing helps you follow up to get the appointment or to get the registration if you're promoting a webinar, or to get the action you need. And so that's why you're going to see your sales really, or I should say your appointments and your response, double or triple when you add on telemarketing, again, to just about any kind of marketing or advertising that you're doing. I'm also going to give you some telemarketing approaches that will position you as a welcome guest and not an annoying pest. That's a little phrase I got from my coach and mentor, Dan Kennedy, but it's true. Sometimes if you call in telemarketing, if you don't have the right approach, you're going to get shut down, blocked, screened. And I'm not saying that won't happen to you ever. I don't have the magic sauce that'll get you in every single time, but we're going to try and reduce that as much as possible, reduce that friction of that phone call coming in, and what do you say and how do you position yourself so that you're not annoying the person you're calling, and of course to increase the chances of getting an actual appointment. I'm also going to show you how to use telemarketing to build a list. It is by far, I think, one of the most effective ways, direct and fastest ways to build a quality list of prospects if you know who your target market is. If you go out and you start renting lists, you still need to use telemarketing to qualify and clean it up. So often I would recommend using telemarketing just to build the list from the beginning. And then also I'm going to touch on how to outsource or when to outsource and work with a telemarketing firm versus bringing it in-house, and of course a number of other things in between those. But those are the main things that we're going to be touching on. So with no further ado, let's just go ahead and dive in. First off, let's talk about the 5 best uses for telemarketing if you're going to bring it into your marketing arsenal. One, of course, I've already mentioned, and that is to clean and qualify a cold list to prepare it for additional marketing. And that'll help you avoid wasting money marketing to prospects who are not a right fit for you. And I see so many people going to InfoUSA or Zap Data or Sales Genie or any of the websites. And by the way, all those list companies, many of them are pulling from the same exact data. They're different companies reselling the same data set, okay? But the reality is most of it is going to be unqualified. So when you rent these lists, many of them haven't been cleaned. They are just compiled lists that are compiled from various different directories. They haven't been validated. And I've seen them be wrong as much as 40-50%, meaning that the businesses are no longer there, or they get the wrong contact or decision maker and those types of things. So when you get one of those lists, one of the things I recommend my clients do is actually go and call those people before you mail it, before you canvass it, before you whatever, because this is really going to help you cut down on sending marketing campaigns and spending time on prospects who aren't there or aren't qualified or are just not even the right contact. Also, I think another great use is to build a prospect list from scratch. I've already mentioned that. Again, if you have a defined target market, like all of the chiropractors in a certain city area, well, you can build a prospect list from telemarketing and just online search, and it's going to be a lot more qualified and clean because you're going to build it and it's going to be recent. And, so that's a really good use for telemarketing. Also, to follow up on a marketing campaign and improve the response. I already said that'll double or triple your response often. Also, to get people to register for a seminar or webinar or other event, really, really key. And also just to set appointments if you want to get in the door and meet with the decision maker. So those are the top 5 uses, best uses for telemarketing. I'm sure there's a lot others I could think of if I really sat down and stretched my brain a little bit, but in reality that's it. So when you hire a telemarketer, these are the kind of activities that you're going to be hiring them to do. You're not necessarily going to be hiring them to sell for you, because if somebody's going to sell, then that's an inside sales position or maybe an outside sales position. And I just want to be really clear that a telemarketer's job is not necessarily to sell. Well, unless maybe there's an instance where it makes sense where they're selling something. But the reality is, most telemarketers are going to be best at just getting an appointment or getting somebody to register for an event or to qualify a list or something like that. They're not going to be inside salespeople. And conversely, I'd also mention that a lot of inside salespeople and outside salespeople do not make good telemarketers. That's a different skill set. It's a different position. Sometimes you can find somebody who would be willing to do some telemarketing, but true telemarketers, that's a whole different genre. That's a whole different skill set than somebody who's going to actually hold the appointment and sell your services. In fact, let me get into this now because I think it's important for you to understand that when you're hiring a telemarketer, a mistake a lot of people make is they actually want to hire somebody who's like a Swiss Army knife. They want them to be able to do the marketing, like get out direct mail campaigns, do the telemarketing follow-up, and then actually go on the appointments and sell. And that's like 3 different people, personality types, skill sets, and everything else. I mean, if somebody could do that, then they're an entrepreneur, because that's what entrepreneurs do. Entrepreneurs, we're good. We have to be good at everything. But when you're hiring people, you want to make sure you're hiring the right person for the job. So just to clarify, telemarketing is a different skill set than inside or outside sales, and it's definitely a different skill set than marketing. If you're going to hire a marketing person, someone who's good at getting newsletters out and getting your website updated and running your Google AdWords accounts and that sort of thing, they're typically not going to be good telemarketers. All right. So again, most IT firms want to hire that Swiss Army knife, but I'm telling you, it's better if you hire for the skill that is needed. So, for example, telemarketing's role is to make cold calls to prospects in an effort to set an appointment, secure a registration for a seminar, or generate a lead in some form or fashion, like have someone go to a website and download a free report. The telemarketer's job is not selling. So they're not supposed to be getting prospects on the phone and talking about all the services you provide and what you do and how you do it and what makes you different. The telemarketer's job is to do nothing but sell that next step. So they don't have to know everything about your services in order to get an appointment. They need to know the value of the appointment and what are you going to do when you get in there. Their job is to mine for opportunities, clean lists, and get people to book appointments or go to a webinar or something like that. And it's a really important, distinct role, because I think, again, a mistake many people make with telemarketers is they try and get them to sell. So they get on the phone with the prospect and they start puking all over the prospect about what they do and how they do it. We do managed IT services and it's 24/7 and all this stuff. Well, they're trying to sell the services in a very brief phone call, and you're not going to do it. The person on the other end is going to hang up on you or lose interest, or the telemarketer is just not going to be able to do a sufficient job in the time frame and just the context of what they're doing there. So again, be very clear. A telemarketer's role is to make cold calls and prospect, to get the appointment, to get the registration, to get the opt-in or whatever the next action is. And that's it, because you're not going to sell them then. You're going to sell them once you get in the door and you get that appointment. So I want to be clear on that. Then you've got inside sales. Now, once, another position, I should say, a lot of people try and mix up is inside sales with telemarketing. Now, an inside salesperson's role is to work existing accounts for additional opportunities, prepare quotes, and be sort of a non-technical customer service person for your clients. Now, this is a more junior sales role. So this is definitely a sales role. They do have to know everything about your products and services. They do have to understand how to quote jobs and so forth, but they might not necessarily be good at making cold calls, and they're probably not very good at closing the big deals yet, just because they don't have the skills or the experience at this time. So if you're going to hire an inside salesperson, the best time to hire one is when you've got enough accounts in-house that if you put somebody on those accounts, their job is to find other opportunities and also just to be customer service, because your existing customers are going to need things from time to time. A new laptop for Susie, or there's going to be a new hire, or they might need a quote on a phone system, or who knows, whatever it is. Your inside salesperson's job is to take those opportunities, find out what's going on, prepare the quotes, get the invoice done, all that sort of thing. There's not a whole lot of selling that has to be done because these are existing accounts. So it's just more of a customer service role. And you can get somebody who's a, sort of an inside salesperson, who's a inexperienced salesperson. They can do really well. Okay. Now the third sort of position in the sales genre, if you will, would be outside sales. Now an outside salesperson's job is, hopefully, if you have one or if you're the one, is to close sales with new clients. So that person has to be a very good, highly professional closer. So telemarketing and your marketing, the job of that is to set up appointments. So your outside sales rep goes on quality appointments, and their job is to close the deal at the highest margins, at the highest dollar amount, to get referrals, to make that customer feel good, to follow up on those leads that are coming in. That's the job of outside sales. Now, outside salespeople, if they're a good closer, often they're not going to be good at telemarketing or won't want to do telemarketing. And quite honestly, if you've got somebody who's great at closing sales, you want to use the marketing to get the appointments for them. So they're spending the majority of their time with high protein, high quality prospects and closing them. You don't want them taking time making telemarketing calls, because you can hire for somebody for like 12 to 15 bucks an hour, and they can call and churn the list to get appointments for your outside salesperson. Or of course, use your marketing, or a combination of your telemarketer with the marketing, because I see telemarketing as a marketing position more than it is a sales position, because it's supporting marketing efforts, right? But what you want to do is make sure that that outside salesperson, who's a high protein, high quality closer, is literally, you're just teeing the ball up so they can knock home runs home. That's what you want. You don't want to mix these roles. And again, a lot of people I see try to mix these roles. They try and get an outside salesperson whose then job is also to telemarket for appointments. Now, sometimes you can find somebody who can do that, and that's great. And I'm not opposed to an outside salesperson when there is no wind, you got to row. So, I mean, sometimes if an outside salesperson doesn't have the appointments coming in, maybe networking or asking for referrals or those kinds of activities they should be doing, mainly working referrals is a big one, to get other appointments. So I'm not saying they should be a big fat cat that just sits back and doesn't do anything except close sales. I mean, sometimes they should be out there prospecting a bit and be on the lookout. But just for the point of clarification on this slide, I want you to understand that these are really the three key positions of your sales team that will be made up. Now, which one do you hire first? Well, I guess it depends. It depends on where you are. If you're a pretty good closer and you're right now playing outside sales, for the company, which is what most smaller MSPs do as they grow, and even the larger ones are always involved in that outside sales role in some manner, then you might want to hire a telemarketer to help with the marketing efforts so that you are going out and closing those deals. Now, if you've got a whole lot of customers, an inside sales rep might be worthwhile to hire, because maybe you are spending a lot of time preparing quotes, and maybe you're not doing as good a job as you could of following up and making sure they're happy and finding out what else is needed, and maybe you just want to get that off your plate. So if you've got a lot of clients, maybe an inside salesperson is the best person to hire at this point. So it really depends on your situation and what you need. Again, if you're going to hire that outside salesperson, you got to make sure you've got marketing to support them, because a really good closer, a really professional salesperson wants to work for a company that has marketing being going on, that has that lead generation engine, they're going to look for that, because companies that are very marketing driven are going to be able to offer that. So for me, I can hire top quality salespeople because we do a ton of marketing and I get appointments for them. And of course, the really good, high protein, high quality people want to come work for me because they're going, well, shoot, you got all the marketing in place. I just got to, I got to do what I do best, which is close them. All right. And you want to set up the same thing, because again, a lot of people try and hire that high quality, high protein outside salesperson. They don't want to pay them any base. They're not generating any leads, and they're like, yeah, who wants to come work for me to close sales? Well, you're going to have a hard time trying to find a quality person who's going to sign up for that gig. I mean, think about it. If you were a professional closer and you were really good at closing sales, wouldn't you want to go work for a company that has the marketing engine that is going to support you and allow you to make big bucks? Because really good professional outside salespeople, they want to make six figures or more. And you want to be able to offer them that opportunity, not by saying, hey, come work for us and cold call your butt off and sell managed services contracts and you can make over $100,000. Well, maybe that's true, but maybe you're not even doing that yet. So, just to put things in perspective, I mean, there's all kinds of people, all walks of life. So obviously you might find somebody who can be both inside and outside sales, and they can play that role because you're a small business and you need someone who's going to play multiple roles. But I just want you to be clear in your mind, that's a rarity, that you're going to find someone who's good at all three or even two of these. Typically what you're going to find is you're going to hire telemarketers to do telemarketing. Inside sales are going to be like junior salespeople. They're going to start out there, and if they do a good job, they can progress to outside sales where they can make more money. So hopefully that clarified that up. I wanted to make sure I pointed that out before we got into the rest of the session, which is really just going to focus on telemarketing, since that is part of marketing's job. All right, so now let's talk about hiring that telemarketer, and where do you find them? Should you outsource it to a company or hire? And there's a lot of companies, especially in the IT space, but it's all in every industry. There's companies that specialize in appointment setting and telemarketing, and often they will only charge you for results. So they come to you and they say, we'll do telemarketing for you, and you pay us a certain amount of money or dollars, and we will guarantee you X number of appointments for those dollars. And if you don't like an appointment, we'll replace it with another one. So it seems pretty obvious. You go, well, that's like a no-brainer. I mean, if they're just I'm only gonna pay them when I go on appointments, that seems like a pretty good deal. And it is, if you can get somebody who can actually make that happen. Because very often I've seen where those people, IT companies, MSPs, bring on those companies, and then the next thing you know, they're going on really crappy appointments, and they're not getting the results, and they've already prepaid $1,000 or whatever it is, and they're not getting anywhere, and everybody's frustrated. So, you got to make sure, if you're going to outsource, you got to outsource properly to the right company, and you've got to be able to manage that department as though they were employees working for you. So let me run down really quick whether it makes more sense for you to outsource or to hire. I think it makes more sense to outsource when you have a project that is maybe a short-term project or bigger than your internal team can handle. So for example, we've got an inside telemarketer that we have, and she does a great job. And, she handles the leads that are coming in and follows up on them. But occasionally we'll have a big project, like we'll have boot camp, or we're going to have a fall road show, like a tour of seminars. And our list is something to the tune of 45,000 names on it. Well, my one telemarketer isn't going to be able to really get through that list in a timely manner that we want to, when we want to promote the direct mail. So like, we'll send out a piece of direct mail, we might send it out to 10,000 names. Well, with one telemarketer, she's not going to be able to call everybody within 24 to 48 hours of that mail hitting their desk, which is what I want. I want the telemarketer to be following up on those leads as soon as they're getting the direct mail. So obviously in that case, when I have a project like that, then I got to outsource it. And we do have a company we outsource to. And again, it's more on a project basis, because we've got certain campaigns that are just bigger than my current in-house telemarketer can handle. And I don't want to have 20 telemarketers on staff because I don't always have those kinds of projects to keep them busy. So that makes sense in that case. Also, if you just can't find and hire an in-house telemarketer, I've tried this for years. I mean, sometimes finding that person and keeping that person can be tough because telemarketers are typically lower paid workers and many of them are working part-time and the turnover is pretty high. So you might find a good one, but then they either move or I've had them accept jobs, where they're sort of young and they're aspiring to something else and they get a better job offered to them, or they're going to school and then they decide to go into the profession they've been studying, or any number of reasons. There's a higher amount of turnover in the telemarketing role. So, sometimes it can be really difficult to find that person and hire them and keep them. And when I used to run a telemarketing department for a company, we were always hiring because we always had churn, always had turnover. Hopefully you don't want that for your in-house person, but sometimes if you're just having a hard time finding and hiring an in-house telemarketer, just go with an outsourced company until you kind of get your systems and processes in place and until you maybe find that person that you want. You also don't want to, maybe you don't want to go through the process of firing and hiring somebody. Maybe that's just, you're saying, you know what, I'm really busy right now and I'm trying to hire techs and I'm doing other things. And maybe that's the case. So maybe you just don't want to go through that process of finding, hiring them. Then, of course, you could work with an outsourced team. But the one thing I'd say is outsourcing does not mean abdicating all management of that resource. So when you outsource the telemarketing, you have to manage that person or that asset or that part of your team every bit as much as if they were in-house. So again, another mistake I see when people go to outsource telemarketing is they hire a company and the company comes up with the script and the company trains the people, and the IT business owner really doesn't get involved in any way. They're not talking to the telemarketer, they're not coaching them, they're not sitting down and thinking through strategy, like what is this person going to say? They're not working on the scripts, they're not reviewing the phone calls that they're having, the recordings of it. So if you're not willing to do that, then outsourcing is going to not work for you because you've got to still be very involved. This is an extension of your company. These people are going to be calling on prospects representing you. You don't want to just say, be hands off and say, okay, just bring me appointments by hook or crook. I don't care what you say, what you do, how you say it. I mean, I know you do, but if you're not managing it, that you might as well just cut them loose to say whatever they can say to get you in the door. And that's when I see it failing every single time. If you're not willing to work with the telemarketing company, with their salespeople and developing the strategy and the scripts and objection handling, and you're not willing to sit and listen to a couple of their recorded calls, if you're not going to do that, then don't outsource. It's going to be a waste of time. Now, when you should hire, I think, is when you have the time to properly find, hire, and manage a full-time person or even a part-time person. And a lot of telemarketers will only want to work part-time, and that's fine. But you want to be able to find them, hire them, and manage them. Don't just give them the 2-part training, which is good luck and hang in there. I mean, you want to have a process that they follow. So here's the list you're going to call. Here's what you're going to say. Here's how you leave a voicemail. If they ask this, you say that. Here's how you clean the list. Here's what you do next. I mean, you really want to have it down to a process and train them and then manage to make sure that they're actually doing what you want them to do. Okay. The other time to hire somebody is when you have enough work for them to be either full-time or part-time. Now, I think anyone who's listening to this session could have enough work for at least a part-time telemarketer, meaning calling on a list, cleaning it, qualifying it, setting appointments. If you have one telemarketer, they should be able to get you 2, 3, 4 appointments a week. And if you can handle that volume, then God bless, hire somebody in-house and have them work for you full-time, because there's always going to be new appointments. There's always going to be more marketing, and that'll drive your company forward, because then it'll force you or your salespeople to start closing more deals, which will give you more cash flow, which will move the company forward. Also, you want to hire when you want to have tighter control over the quality of the phone calls and results. And again, I've worked with outsourced firms, but it makes me really nervous. And I could tell you from experience, not only my own personal experience, but the experience of my clients, that when you hire in-house, you're going to get a better quality person almost every single time. I've had So many clients jump from one company to another company to another company, and they finally get frustrated outsourcing. They end up just biting the bullet, hiring somebody, and they end up getting way better results. And it's because that person's now in your office, or they're working directly for you, and it's an employee situation. So you just tend to get a better quality person because you tend to manage them better. You tend to hire the right person. You have control over who's making the phone calls, and you can often like listen in on the calls and see what's going on. So that's another reason to hire in-house. And again, in my experience, those who bring telemarketing in-house get better results than those outsourcing for this function. And I've seen it so many times where somebody starts with outsourcing, which is fine if that's where you're at right now, and they kind of sort of get some results, but they don't get stellar results, and they get frustrated. They'll try someone else and try someone else, and eventually they end up hiring somebody. So that's just what I typically see. And again, only if I think if you would manage the company doing that you outsource to, and you're working with a quality company, then you'll get results. But you got to manage that outsource as much as you would hire, or much as you would manage the in-house person. And if you want to know what vendors to use, go up to the vendor directory up on the dashboard, or post something to the queue. There's always new vendors coming around that are doing telemarketing, and some actually start out good, and then they get swamped with business, or I don't know what goes on, and then they don't do such a great job. So my recommendation is, if you're looking to outsource, go up to the dashboard, go up to the vendor directory area, and see what your peers have commented on the various companies, because sometimes you'll find out who not to hire as much as who to hire, and that's a very valuable resource. All right, so let's move on, and let's talk about how to fail with telemarketing. All right, and I've already mentioned some of this, so I'm going to go quick. First of all, you can fail if you outsource it without heavy involvement in the scripts, the training, the management, troubleshooting. Again, outsourcing doesn't mean it's completely hands-off. It means that you're just working with an outsourced company, and you want to manage them like you would manage an employee. Second way to fail is to have unreasonable expectations for results. Like anything else, it's not a quick fix. And so when a telemarketer is calling, or if you start doing telemarketing, most telemarketers can dial 80 to 100 dials a day, and they're only going to get to the decision maker 20 to 30% of the time. And if they're pretty dang good, they should be able to set appointments with 5-10% of the people that they talk to. Well, that's not a whole lot of people when you get right down to it. And some of the appointments are not going to be real qualified. You're going to have to work with that person to define the script, so that they're bringing you qualified people in appointments, and they're saying the right things. So like anything else, if you're not willing to really put some work and management into it, it's not going to succeed. Also, expecting the appointments to be easy to close as referrals. I'm telling you right now, they won't be. And when you start doing telemarketing for appointments, or any kind of marketing and advertising to cold lists, they are not going to be as easy to close as referrals. And if you've been spoiled up to now, where almost all the new clients you've gotten have been through referral, you're going to be in for a real shock, and you're going to have to learn how to sell. Because when you're talking to a new prospect, chances are they're talking to 3-4 other companies, or they're just kind of giving you that shy maybe, and you have to really be able to sell to close them. They're not going to just say, hey, I want to buy managed services. Here's my checkbook. How much? I mean, that's just not going to happen. You're going to have to sell them sometimes on the concept of managed services. They might want to hire you over break fix. They might start trying to needle you over the price quite a bit. Those people shouldn't be disqualified. It's not that they're not qualified if they're just saying, hey, I'm kind of looking for someone to come in here and do break fix. They just need to be sold on the point of view of whatever your solution is, whether maybe it is you sell break fix, and if that's what you sell, God bless, that's awesome. Now, if you sell some sort of managed IT or cloud or whatever it is that your solution is, you probably just need to educate them about why your solution is the best, justify the price, and build the value and overcome objections. And again, if you've been spoiled with referrals up till now, you're in for a big shock when you start actually getting out into the world and doing marketing and lead generation, because you're really going to have to learn how to sell. Also, another way to fail is hire the wrong person. Now, the one thing, again, I mentioned this a little bit in a previous slide, but Don't hire a marketing manager or an administrative assistant or someone who's quote unquote good on the phone or your own techs or anyone else who's not an experienced telemarketer. This is really important. You want to hire somebody who has done telemarketing in the past and has been successful with it. So if you hire somebody who is a marketing manager and then you say, hey, could you call and follow up on these leads? Well, they might do it just because they're a good person, good worker, and they want to keep their job, but they might not be good at it. They might hate it and cringe and feel weird about it. And if they feel that way, they're not going to be effective on the phone. So if you're going to hire a telemarketer, hire a telemarketer. Okay, it's really key. So many people say, well, what do you look for in a good telemarketer? The number one thing I look for is someone who's been successful doing this in the past. That's going to tell you whether or not they can do it for you. All right, really simple. Also, don't give up before you figure out how to make this work. Telemarketing will work. I have hundreds of clients who have used telemarketing in conjunction with other marketing or just straight telemarketing with no direct mail, no kind of pre-selling whatsoever, and they've made it work, meaning it's profitable, it's successful, it pays for itself. But if you just say, oh, it's telemarketing doesn't work and you give up, well, that you gave up before you figured it out. It's not that telemarketing doesn't work. And by the way, all marketing sucks when you don't know how to do it right, okay? So it will work for you, but you got to dedicate the time to working that oil well, to building it, refining it, to get it to work for your business. All right, now let's talk about hiring the right person. I've already touched on this a little bit, but I'm going to reiterate it again because repetition is needed in these lessons often. But some tips on hiring the right person is, again, only hire someone when you're going to devote the time to manage them. And managing them means training them, listening in on their phone calls, coaching them, and looking at the number of dials, contacts, appointments, sales that you're generating, that sort of thing. If you're not willing to do that, if you're only going to give them the two-part training, good luck and hang in there, there's the phone, then they're going to fail, and it's going to be your fault. Also, you'll most likely need to pay a telemarketer a base of some kind. Very common for them to get paid anywhere from $12 to $18 per hour plus a bonus for appointments set. So, again, this is just general rule of thumb. $10 to $20 for every appointment set that's qualified. And you might even go so far as to give a percentage of sales closed. So you might give them 1% to 5% if you're generous. That is not normally what happens. Normally, you pay them a base and then you pay them a bonus for appointments set, okay? But most people will want some type of base, and typically the base is going to be 50% of what they should be able to earn with the other bonuses and incentives. Also, scale the bonuses and commissions. So you want to adjust it higher or lower based on their hourly compensation. But to give you an example, what I mean by scaling the bonuses and commission is obviously, if five, maybe your goal is they got to get 5 appointments a week, and if they don't get that, or if they just get that or anything under, they get no bonus because that's just their base is covering that. You're paying them, say, $15 an hour. They get you 5 appointments a week, and that's great. Okay, in that case, you might not give them any kind of extra bonus. Now, if they get 5 to 10 appointments, maybe you give them $10 per appointment, and 10 plus appointments a week, maybe $20 per appointment they set. These are just really big, broad brush, general numbers. But the key to it is you want to make sure the total cost per lead, an appointment they set, is within a reasonable range of what you can afford to pay cost per lead. All right, so don't be too cheap, but don't pay them more than you have to. Okay, and again, what you pay them per appointment is got to be weighed against what you're paying them as a base per hour and so forth like that. So, my suggestion is start out sort of conservative. You can always bonus them up, but you don't want to overpay them from the beginning because that sometimes can be disincentivize them because they get fat, dumb, and happy, and they don't really stretch to get those additional appointments. Also, make sure you're very clear on what results they need to produce. So if you want them to make 80 to 100 dials a day, get on the phone with 20 decision makers, close 5%, and the appointment and the type of person you want to go on an appointment with, and the premise under which that appointment should be set. It shouldn't be just, hey, Bob's going to come out and drop off some material. It should be you have an actual appointment to sit down with a decision maker and have a discussion. All right, that's, you got to be really clear that that's what's got to happen so that the telemarketer doesn't go off track. Also, consider hiring a part-time person if you don't have the time or money to manage a full-time telemarketer. There are a lot of really good part-time workers out there, stay-at-home moms, retirees that don't want to work a full-time job, but they'll give you 4 or 5 hours a day, and sometimes that's more than enough if they're pretty good and they're setting a couple appointments a week for you. Everybody can be happy. Also, set proper expectations in the ad for the job so that the applicants you're getting are qualified. So this is direct marketing 101, really, if you think about it. So when you advertise for the position, make sure they know they're going to be doing 70, 80, 100 dials per day, every day, an expectation of setting 3 to 5 appointments per week, that sort of thing. If you want them to work in your office, you got to specify that. You should specify that they have telemarketing experience, and this would be in the actual ad itself. Okay, you don't want to advertise inside sales position. That's different than telemarketing. If this is a telemarketing role, make sure it's very clear that this is what the person will be doing, because if you advertise a sales position and then they find out later it's 80 dials a day, some people are going to just implode. So you might as well just save yourself the time. Describe the type of person you want in the ad and the job that they will be doing and the expectations you have for that position. That way the candidates that respond, hopefully, you're going to be more qualified. That doesn't guarantee it, because some people just spray their resumes out there hoping for something. But the reality is, if your ad and your job description is clear and it shows them what your expectations are, it will cut down on the number of people that contact you that are a bad fit. They should also be able to set at least one appointment the first full week of calling. I'm going to tell you, if you hire a telemarketer and they spend an entire week cold calling or calling on a list and they have not set at least one appointment, they're probably not the right person. Now, I'll caveat that if the list was really crappy or something like that, maybe there's some exceptions to the rule, but you should see results fast. It shouldn't take you 3 weeks, 4 weeks of them cold calling, getting nowhere, and to keep them on. Get rid of them. If they cannot set appointments in the first week, maybe I'd give them a second week, then they're not the right person for you. Also, again, like I said before, the best indicator of whether or not they're going to be successful is, do they have a track record of success doing the same thing somewhere else? All right. So use the career history form at topgrading.com. Top Grading is a book about hiring really top professionals. And I'm telling you, that career history form and that process of interviewing someone is sheer brilliance. So go to topgrading.com, go ahead and get that. Also, speak to every single manager or boss they've worked for in the past to validate any claims, the strengths and weaknesses. So the career history form is step one. That'll give you a really clear snapshot of every single position, whether they left under their own steam or they were fired, what they earned, what their strengths and weaknesses are. It's a brilliant document. So once you get the career history form back, then you let that candidate know that before you hire them, they have to arrange for you to speak to every single manager or boss they've worked for in the past, just to make sure if they say they were a top appointment setter for XYZ company, they really truly were. It's like truth serum. And again, that's part of the top grading method, and I'm telling you, it's brilliant. If you get that career history form and that little package that they sell on their website, you'll save yourself so much headache in hiring the wrong people. And also, another little test is, if they don't try to close you and they don't try and follow up with you after they've spoken to you, then don't hire them. They're supposed to be salespeople. They're supposed to be telemarketers. If they're not trying to close you and they're not following up with you, don't hire them. I mean, maybe if it was a technical position, I'd forgive it a little bit. But really, anybody who you're hiring that is in some kind of sales or telemarketing role that doesn't try and sell you on them, doesn't follow up, doesn't ask the right questions, doesn't seem eager and enthusiastic and excited about the position, don't hire them. All right, now let's talk about managing this asset, this marketing asset or marketing oil well by the numbers, okay? Some really general numbers to kind of give you a lay of the land when it comes to telemarketing is without an auto dialer, someone who's dialing the phone, they should be able to make between $80 and $100 a day. Now, if they're actually getting through and having conversations with prospects, they're not going to be able to do as many. If you have them also cleaning up a list, it probably is not going to be that many either, because they have to stop and actually validate the information, or if they're researching a list. So in other words, if you don't have a list preloaded and they're just dialing and dialing and dialing, again, that's going to slow them down. So it's dependent. 80 to 100 is like the max. If they're cleaning a list, if they're qualifying a list, it's going to take longer. If they've got to research the list, it's going to take longer. How long, it just depends on the quality of the list and what you're asking them to do. There's so many variables, it's hard for me to give you an answer on that. But just as a general rule of thumb, a pure telemarketer with a good list who's calling on this list, 80 to 100 dials per day. Now, they won't be able to make as many if you're updating their database, or if they have to search for the companies to call in the first place. They should be able to get the decision maker on the phone 20 to 35% of the time. So about 20 contacts for every 100 dials. The rest of the time, they're going to get voicemail, busy, not in the office, or any number of things. But they should be able to get 20 to 35% of the time, get the decision maker on the phone. They should also be able to set an appointment with about 5 to 10% of the decision makers that they talk to. So 5 to 10 appointments for every 100 conversations they have with a decision maker. And again, this is a very good model. In other words, this is not like, if somebody can do this, they're considered a very good telemarketer, but this is doable. So you might as well try and reach for what's doable. Now, if they're getting appointments with 20% of the time, awesome. They're off the charts, amazing. And I'll also point out that it depends again on the quality of the list, your reputation with it, what the offer it is that you're actually selling. So for example, for us, we have an offer right now we call the Godfather, and it is for a free one-on-one marketing consultation, and we give you the marketing roadmap, and there's a lot of value built around that. There's a lot of marketing that goes on. So we actually have a very high appointment setting ratio. So ours is 40 to 50%, but that's because there's so much marketing supporting that telemarketing call. Now, if you don't have the marketing to support the telemarketing call, the results might be lower, like 5% is what we're talking about of the decision makers they talk to that you can get an appointment with. And it also depends on what you're using to get in. Is it just, hey, we want to come in and talk to you about IT? Or is it about, some of my clients use other means of getting in, like maybe like a HIPAA consultation, or they do web design or hosting or something to that effect. Sometimes that also the offer you're using to get in will make a difference. Now, obviously, if you don't do HIPAA for doctors or you're not selling web design, then go with your IT. There's nothing wrong with that. But again, these are big, broad, general numbers. And I'll tell you, because there's a lot of variables that come into play here. So keep in mind, these are a big rule of thumb. They're better than having nothing, but everything's a little situational dependent. So if you have questions about your specific numbers, then call in the office or get on one of the live Q&A calls, or get on the queue, and we can dig a little bit more into your specific situation and see what's going on. All right. Also, depending on how the appointment is set up, meaning the offer you make, the premise of the meeting, how they were introduced, and so forth, you should be able to close at least 20 to 30% of the people you meet with at minimum. So again, if you're going on sales calls that your telemarketers are setting, then you should be able to close 20 to 30% of them. Now, that might seem low because maybe you've been only talking to referrals up till now, but at least 20 to 30%, that is like the bare bones minimum. If you're not even closing that, then something's wrong with the appointments, or something's wrong with your selling process. And quite honestly, my goal for all my clients is to get them where they're closing 70-80% of the proposals, or the point of getting to proposal that they get to. So again, you're not going to close them all, but 20 to 30% of the people you meet with off that telemarketing appointment should actually go and become a customer. Also, another tip: before going on the appointment, if your telemarketer sets the appointment, call the person you're going to meet with and say, hey, Bob, I'm going to be the person coming out to your office on Thursday at 2 o'clock. And in order to prepare, can I just ask you a couple questions? And what that'll do is that will lower the number of appointments you go on, but it will reveal what the telemarketer is saying. So if the telemarketer is doing a good job, this won't put the person off at all. In fact, it'll actually help solidify the appointment. And what you want to do is use that phone call to kind of make sure it's a good quality person. It's it's the kind of prospect you want to meet with, and you want to make sure it's not just, oh, well, he said you were just going to come out and drop some materials off. Well, unless that's what you planned on doing, you want to actually clarify that or resell them at that time. Tip number 2 is figure out a way to track your telemarketer's phone calls, meaning dials, and time spent on the phone and the call recordings. Now, how you track that depends on your phone system and the CRM you're using. I can't just say here's the one you use. The one we use right now is designed specifically for Salesforce. So it plugs into Salesforce. It's designed to go into Salesforce, and that's the CRM we're using. And it tracks who they called, how many dials, how much time they spent on the phone. It records the calls in the account of the person. So if I want to go back and review a telemarketer's call or a sales call, I can do that. But again, it depends on the phone system you're using. It depends on the CRM you're using. There's a lot of different ones out there, so I can't just give you a recommendation because it's the unbelievable number of variables. But I will tell you, go out and find one that will work with your phone system so you can track how many dials, time spent on the phone, and actually even record the calls. Because if you depend on your telemarketer to report that to you, I promise you they're going to over-report. They're going to say they're talking to more people than they are. They're going to say they're spending more time on the phone than they are. I promise you, this is one of the best things I've ever done to manage my salespeople, because activity will produce certain results. And what you want to get it down to is a secret sauce of, okay, if we make 80 dials, we'll get on the phone with the decision maker 20% of the time, and we'll set an appointment with at least 10% of those people or 5% of those people. And out of those 5% of people, 30% will become customers at an average sale of $1,000. Well, when you get that kind of number funnel going, then it's just a matter of knowing what your goals are, because you can crank it up or down. And you can also manage to see, well, if somebody's making a lot of phone calls and they're getting on the phone with a lot of contacts, but they're not setting the appointments, well, that tells you that there's something off on the script. Or maybe they're making a lot of phone calls, but they're not getting to the decision maker. Well, then I'd want to review, what are they saying to the gatekeeper when they call in? So, this will also help you. Managing by the numbers is going to help you get better results, and to create that sales pipeline or funnel to make sure you got enough appointments coming in to hit your sales and growth goals. And I hope that makes sense. If it doesn't, again, get on a Q&A call and we'll go over it. Some more general numbers, though, to go over is your cost per appointment is generally going to run you from $150 to $350 per qualified appointment. So when you look at the cost of the telemarketer, of the direct mail, of all the marketing that's going in, it should be generally running you $150 to $350 per qualified appointment. And again, it's going to vary depending on the prospect you're trying to reach, the list you're using, the skill of the telemarketer, all those things. But, again, these are big, broad, general numbers, all right? Make sure you make intelligent decisions about telemarketing, whether it's working or not, based on actual numbers and your return on investment. Don't just go, well, I think, we're only getting 2 appointments a week. This isn't working. It could be working really well. It just needs to be refined or multiplied, okay? So let me give you an example. Let's say your average cost per appointment is $300. That pays for the telemarketer, the direct mail, the whatever it is you're doing that is going into that marketing oil well. to get that appointment. Maybe let's say your average cost per appointment is $300, all right? Let's say you close 20% of the appointments that you go on, and your average sale is $1,000 per month. You typically do 3-month contracts, and let's say so the average total business that client represents is $36,000. That means if you got 10 appointments, the cost is going to be $3,000, right? $300 cost per appointment, 10 appointments, $3,000. Let's say you get 2 sales because you closed 20%. Your average sale is $1,500 cost per sale. So that's what your customer acquisition cost is, because obviously you spent $3,000 to get 10 appointments, you closed 2, you got 2 customers. So pretty simple math, right? And $1,500 cost per sale is not a whole lot. If you think about it, you're getting $36,000 in sales gross. Let's say you have a 50% margin on that, which you should be able to have at least a 50% margin on those sales. Well, I mean, then it becomes an absolute no-brainer. I mean, think about it. If you were, how often would you go to a bank and give them $1,500 for $36,000? Now, I know you got to get it back over 3 years. I get it. But the point is, that is a successful model that we can roll out all day long. In fact, we could spend a whole lot more on getting those appointments if we wanted to, because if you think about it, if your average sale is $36,000 or whatever it is, that means you're getting $18,000 in profit. All right. And that's not including cross-sell, upsell, referrals, all the rest that comes with that customer acquisition, right? So how long would you be willing to, how many times would you be willing to spend $1,500 to make $18,000 back? Well, you would do it all day long. So this is a successful model, but so often I see people giving up on telemarketing because they're like, oh, I spent $3,000 and we only got a customer, even one customer. Under this model, one customer would be worth it. You should be laughing. So again, make sure if you make any decisions about telemarketing, whether it's working or not, you got to do this kind of microscopic, detailed analysis to really understand what your costs are and what your return is. Now, obviously, if you're getting 0, then you can't multiply 0, but at least make sure you're doing this before you give up on telemarketing and make a decision as to whether or not it's working. All right, so now let's talk about my preferred approach to using telemarketing. I really like using telemarketing as long as you're positioning and not just cold prospecting. Now, what I mean by that is I believe that the best use of telemarketing is to follow up on other direct response marketing that you're doing. More specifically, talking about educational direct response marketing. Okay, so for example, let's say we sent out a sales letter first, just to kind of grease the skids. And if you use telemarketing in conjunction with direct mail, you want to make sure that the telemarketer calls and follows up within 24 to 48 hours of that letter hitting their desk. So you would put yourself on the list, and as soon as you got your piece of direct mail, you're going to start calling that list. All right. Now, instead of calling up and saying, hey, I'm Joe Blow from IT ABC or whatever, and I was calling to see if we could set an appointment to talk about your IT needs, which is going to get you hung up on more often than not. When you call in, you say, hi, my name is Rob, and I'm calling from Nashville Computer, and I'm calling to find up on a letter we sent you on Monday that should have arrived on your office yesterday. Do you recall seeing it? It was in a, and then you can describe the envelope. It was in a big red envelope with a pair of goggles, talking about how to take a closer look at your network security. And if you send an elaborate direct mail, they're going to remember it. That's one of the reasons I like sending elaborate direct mail, because it really gets noticed and remembered. And then when you call in, the answer is, oh yeah, I did get that. I was calling to let you know that we had a very good response to the offer for the free network security assessment, and there's only 2 left. May I book this for you now before they're all taken? Now, instantly you can see that this script is a lot different. It's letting the sales letter do the work. Now, they're going to have one of 2 responses. They're going to say, well, yeah, I have it here. I haven't had a chance to look at it. So if that's the case, the telemarketer can say, well, let me give you a quick Reader's Digest version of what this is all about. And they're just talking about the offer of the free network security assessment. They're not selling your company. They're not selling managed services yet. They're only trying to get the appointment. That's all they're doing, is selling the appointment, the first step. Okay. Now, when they call with this kind of offer, the gatekeeper will also let them through more frequently, because when you call in, you say, hey, my name is Robin from Nashville Computer, and I'm calling Bob to follow up on a letter I sent him on Monday. Is he in? Well, now I've just stated who I am, the company I'm with, and the purpose of my call. And it doesn't sound as sort of like schemy as saying, hey, this is Robin, is Bob in? And if he isn't, oh, well, then just here's a number. Tell him to give me a call back. You try and be all clever and cute and try not to tell anybody who you are. Well, let me tell you something. A busy executive, they're not going to call you back. If they don't know who you are, what you're calling about, they're not going to be sitting there calling you back. They got a million things going on. They're just going to say, I'll wait till they call back or whatever, find out who they are and what they want, right? But if you use this approach, hey, my name is Robin. I'm calling from Nashville Computer. I'm calling to follow up on a letter we sent Bob on Monday. Is he in? And now you know who you are, what company you're calling up from, and what was what you're calling about. Now they might say, what's the letter about? And you could say, well, it was a letter that arrived. It was in a big envelope, had a pair of goggles in it, and it was all talking about how to take a closer look at your network security. And I just wanted to see if he got the letter and to see what he'd like to do. That's it. You don't have to sell them on the phone, on the gatekeeper. And if the answer is no, then the answer is no. That's fine. I'd rather have a no than a maybe, right? But that way I promise you, using this approach, you're going to get through more often, and you're not going to be seen as such an annoying pest. And again, make sure you make that phone call follow-up within 24 to 72 hours of the letter hitting their desk. It's really important. It gets cold after that. And if they're not ready to meet with you, then I would also recommend you have a drop-down offer of an online video or a free report that is essentially a sales letter for you and your services. So for example, let's say you sent out this letter and it was a pair of like Coke bottle glasses, which is one of the letters we have in the toolkit. But it was like, hey, maybe you should take a closer look at what you're getting for the money for your IT support or something like that. And you're calling to get that appointment to do that network security assessment or whatever. And they're like, well, we're really fine. We don't need any right now. And you could say, great, well, how about if I at least do this? I'd like to send you a free report we put together on the top 10 brand new security risks for small businesses like yours, or whatever the niche is, for businesses like yours that hackers are using right now to infiltrate networks, wipe out bank accounts. And it's a really good report. So I know you're not ready to meet with us, but if this will have some great information for you, can I at least send that over? And often they'll say yes. So now you at least get something into their hands. You might get their email address. You can engage with them. And of course, the free report, the video, the whatever should then, of course, sell you even more on your expertise. Offer the network security assessment again at the end of that piece. And this is how you start to really engage prospects, by giving them something of value rather than just calling up and saying, hey, we do IT support. Do you want some? Because that's, it's a very cold, non-relationship building kind of way to make a telemarketing call. All right, another way to position with your telemarketing is to use it to drive people to a webinar or a seminar where you then close them, okay? So again, no telemarketer is going to be as good as you are at selling your company, selling your vision, selling the value of what you do. All right, so when I use telemarketers, I'm not trying to get them to sell me. If a telemarketer's calling, if I can get them to just get the prospect to go to a website and register for a webinar, I'll do the work once I get them on the webinar, because I can control that. I can use the time wisely. All I want the telemarketer to do is get them to register, right? So this is another way where you can be positioned more as a welcome guest versus an annoying pest. All right, so again, you call in, hey, if you're talking to the gatekeeper, this is Robin from Nashville Computer, and I was calling Bob. I wanted to invite him to our VIP guest to a private seminar that we're holding for CEOs just like him. Is he available? So again, who I am, what my company's about, and who I am, who my company is, and what we're calling about. And so now that satisfies the gatekeeper. And if you get through to the decision maker, you say, hey, I'm just calling to invite you because We are targeting medical practices. This seminar is all about HIPAA compliance and the new rule that just came out, and we're going to be educating medical practices on this. Or I'm just using that as an example. It could be any business. It could be maybe nonprofits. You could say we've figured out a way for nonprofits to get their IT support paid for under a different division by filing it differently within their nonprofit organization. And really critical IT projects that they thought they didn't have budget for, we can show them how to get budget for and how they can get it approved. And we're going to be discussing that on this webinar. And since you're the director of this nonprofit, or maybe you're the IT manager of this nonprofit, we thought this would be of interest to you, and we wanted to invite you to be our VIP guest. Now, again, if you take that approach, now you're a welcome guest more than an annoying pest, because now you're offering something of value. And I promise you, whether it's a free report, free assessment, a webinar, a seminar, a lunch and learn, executive breakfast, if you're calling and using telemarketing to give something of value rather than just, hey, we do IT support, do you want some? You're going to get through more often. You're going to be perceived more as that welcome guest. And I'm telling you, you're going to get better results. All right. But again, always have a drop down offer, maybe of an online video or free report. So if they say, well, I don't know if I can make that webinar, that seminar, then you say, look, we summarized this in a really good article that we wrote the other day. May I send that to you? That way, at least you have another way of getting some information into their hands. Also, you can use the free report approach, which we're kind of using and been talking about anyway. But so let's say you have basically one of my sales letters, okay? And, you're using that, or one of the free reports I have that is on security, okay? So you would call in, you say, I'm calling to let you know about a new executive report we've created titled 7 Ways Businesses Accidentally Invite Hackers, Viruses, and Cyber Criminals into Their Network, and how to protect your data from falling into the wrong hands. And inside this report, we talk about some of the dangers of cloud computing, email scams, and why most backup systems are a complete waste of money. And it's also going to provide you answers to the 10 most common questions we hear from CEOs like you regarding network security, cloud computing, keeping your data safe. And because this is so important, we're making it available for free to CEOs in our area. What's the best address for me to mail this to? Great. I've got 2 quick questions. Make sure I get the right info. And then you can start asking them a couple questions like, do you outsource your IT support? Are you considering upgrading your network in any time in the near future? So when you call in, when you get the decision maker on the phone, you're not trying to close the appointment in this case. What you're doing more is lead generating. So you might also say, we have a website set up. Mr. CEO, if you'll go over to this website in front of your computer, great. Okay, go to www.itsupportnashville.com or whatever your URL is. Then just you'll see the free report there. Just enter your name and company, and on the very next page, you're going to get access to this free report. I can also email it to you if you prefer. Let me ask you a couple questions, like how many PCs do you have? Do you have a server? Are you outsourcing your IT support? Great. Well, let me send this free report over. Now, that's like step 1. Once you do this, to get into the decision maker, you qualify them a bit, you get that free report in their hands. Now, of course, at the end of the free report, there should be an offer for a network audit or some kind of appointment that you get in there and you review their security or whatever the report's about. Then you can make another second telemarketing call next week and say, well, Mr. CEO, we had such a great response to that report. We are offering the people who requested it a free network security audit or assessment or a IT optimization plan. If you meet with us, we can map out your company's security plan, or how you can move to the cloud to save money. It just depends on obviously what the report was about, and then you use it to get the appointment. But by now you have the decision maker's name, you've gotten some material into their hands. If you did the script correctly, you got some information about them. So this could be a 2-step approach to using telemarketing, where you get the free report into their hands and then you follow up the next week to see if they would like to meet with you to discuss the information that you gave them in the free report. Okay, So when you mail the report, by the way, all right, you want to make sure you don't just mail the report. Mail it along with a copy of your book, like a mini shock and awe box, and maybe an audio business card or an interview somebody did with you, recent copies of your newsletter, maybe a booklet or a list of testimonials. It could even be a checklist titled "Not All IT Consultants Are Equal: 5 Things You Should Demand from the Company Securing and Supporting Your Network." That's kind of like a wedge technique to get you wedged in between them and the incumbent provider, if there is one. Maybe a certificate waiving your usual $300 fee for an IT security network protection consultation. And maybe it has an expiration date of 3 to 4 weeks out to add a little scarcity. And then you call again to follow up with the schedule to schedule the consult. So again, just to clarify, the first telemarketing call that comes in, you're just getting the free report into their hands. You wait maybe a week, you send them this mini shock and all box with the report, and then you call again a week following up saying, hey, we sent you the report, and in it we gave you a $300 voucher for the security and network protection consultation, but it's going to expire in 3 weeks. Is this something you would like or not? And again, if you take this approach, you're going to be viewed as a welcome guest. You're going to get in the door more often. You're going to get compliance with the gatekeeper because you're not necessarily calling to sell them anything. You're calling to give them something, to give them the free report, to invite them as your VIP guest to a seminar. And even if you leave a voicemail, there's still more value here than if you are, just calling and saying, we do IT support managed services. Do you want some? Okay. This is going to be a more elegant approach. You're adding value in advance, and you're positioning yourself differently than the vast majority of people who are telemarketing for appointments. Now, one of the things you do want to do is negative preparation, because you are going to get some people saying, we're just fine, we don't need this. And that's, again, where I would recommend that you have some sort of drop-down offer, like a free report. So you could say, I appreciate that. So let me suggest this. Let me just send you our free report, an IT competency checklist for CEOs that outlines 21 critical questions your current IT person should be able to say yes to, that also outlines 5 big data security dangers that we have found most IT consultants will never so much as even mention unless you raise the question. And it'll take you less than 3 minutes to review, and you'll know whether or not you're really fine. And if you are, great, at least you know for sure. But if after reading this you have any concerns or doubts, I can schedule that network security assessment and give you some straight answers about your current network security and determine if your data is being backed up and if you really are safe from hackers, viruses, and other dangers. So what's your email address? So this is, again, another way that if someone says, hey, we're fine, you can still send them some free content, like the free report that we're talking about here, or you can send them maybe to a recorded webinar you have or something. Because if somebody says we're just fine, that just means they're not in pain. They just are not in a place where they're looking to make a transition yet. But you don't want to say, okay, fine, great, and then hang up. Because then where do you go from there? And this is why with telemarketing, I want you to think about every month that you're calling, what is the educational content? What's the value that you're going to be giving away? Because if you call somebody up 1 month and they say, we're just fine, and you say, okay, great, well, you don't need IT support, thanks very much. Well, then what do you do next month? Do you not call them again, or do you call them again and say, hey, it's me again. I just was wondering if you're still just fine. We still offer IT support and wanted to know if you want some. The person's going to say, well, I told you we're just fine. You go, okay, great, thanks so much. And you hang up and you call back next week or next month and say, well, we're still here. We still do IT support. I mean, pretty soon they're going to be incredibly annoyed with you. But if you're using telemarketing to call and invite them to a seminar, maybe 1 month it's on cloud computing, then they're saying, well, I can't make that seminar, I'm not interested. Okay, that's fine. Well, that month you take them out of that rotation for that invitation. Next month you have maybe this free report that you put together, 21 critical security questions your current IT person should be able to say yes to. So when you telemarket that month, you're saying, hey, we've just put together this free report and we wanted to give it to you. We've revealed and outlined 21 really critical questions your current IT person should be able to say yes to, and I just want to get this in your hands. Well, even if they're still just fine, at least you're not calling and saying, hey, we do IT support, do you want some? They know you do that, but you're giving them something of value and having a conversation with them that at least has some variances in it so you don't get shut down. That's why I'm such a big proponent of educational direct response marketing, because if you're offering things like seminars and webinars and videos and free reports that provide value and on different topics, then you always have a reason to call, because you have a new report, you've got a new seminar, you've got a new idea or concept. And that way, the person still could say, I'm not interested, take me off the list. I'm not saying you won't get that, but it will lower that resistance. So that way you can continue to market to them because you're adding value, not just trying to get a sales call. And I hope that makes sense, and it starts bringing together your not only your telemarketing strategy, but also your overall marketing strategy. Because again, if you call somebody and they say, we're just fine, and your call was, well, we do IT support, do you want some? Well, that kind of shuts you down. And if you might try them again in 6 months or whatever, but that's a long time to be calling in between, calling a prospect, and you want to engage them more frequently than that. All right, so let me give you some more random tips and good ideas. First of all, let's talk about scripts versus no scripts. I prefer scripts. That way you're not relying on the telemarketer having a good day, a bad day, or heavily relying on the telemarketer to think on their feet. Because I used to run a telemarketing department, and I used to think that scripts are awful. And the reality is there's nothing wrong with having a script. Sounding like you're reading a script is what you want to avoid. So there's just like an actor would prepare. An actor memorizes their lines so they can focus on the delivery. All right. Having a script also allows you to create a formula that you can replicate and teach others. Because if it's just like, well, here's what you say to get in, but then from there kind of pick up on what they're saying and go with it. Well, that's really hard to train somebody to do. And some people can do it. They're really good, but it's going to be the very few that actually can do that and be successful. Having a script and a clear offer to get the person to from point A to point B, like register for a seminar or go to a web page and download a report. That's a very specific action, and the telemarketer knows how to get the person to that point. But if you just kind of say call in and sort of wing it, it's not going to happen. You've got to have some process that they can replicate and follow. It's got to be a formula. It would be like me taking new chefs into a restaurant and saying, well, okay, here's all the ingredients. Now, make something. You want to have that recipe that they can follow. And then once they learn the recipe, they can work on testing different ways of saying things, different phrases, different ways of approaching the same thing to try and improve the recipe, of course. But the key is you still got to have that formula, all right? And by the way, designing a script forces you to think through objections and common questions and have an appropriate answer, or even avoid objections from coming up in the first place. So again, you write the script and think of all the objections that could come up and the questions that could come up. And then if you document that, then you give that to your sales people, your telemarketer. Now they can memorize it. They should be able to learn it and memorize it, so they're not reading the script to read it, but they know the answer because you've documented it for them. All right, now let's touch on how to talk to gatekeepers, because if you're calling B2B, you're obviously going to get a gatekeeper often, when answering the phone. If you get voicemail, no problem. You leave your script on your voicemail, no big deal. But if you get the quote unquote gatekeeper, that a lot of telemarketers see that as their adversary, somebody who has to be sneaked around or gotten around and so forth. And I think that's a mistake. Gatekeepers are there to help make sure that the CEO gets through to to kind of like act as a router, if you will, just to make sure that they are getting the caller to the right person. And if you're calling for the CEO, it's not that the CEO won't ever take your call, so don't start out with that premise. But the gatekeeper really just needs to know who you are, what you're calling about, and are they expecting your call? They're just trying to see how they should deal with this phone call. So when you call in, if you get a quote unquote gatekeeper, start every call with who you are and where you're calling from. All right, so hi, this is Robin Robbins calling from Technology Marketing Toolkit. I'm calling for Bob Jones, please. That's as simple as that. All right, now they might start asking you the next question, which is, what's this about? Now, sometimes they won't even ask you that. Sometimes they'll just put you through and you might get voicemail, or you might get to the person direct. So that's perfect approach. Who you are, the company you're calling from, and just ask for the person you want for by name. Just start out that simple. But again, be prepared to answer the question, can I tell him what this is about? Now, for example, if you sent them a letter, like our current campaign that we're running for lead generation is we send out a U.S. priority mail package. It's a pretty hefty little package. So what we would say is, I'm calling to follow up on a FedEx letter we sent him on Friday. He should have received yesterday. Or I'm calling about an invitation we sent him last week to a webinar we're holding on Thursday. Or you could just say, I'm calling about an invitation we sent him. I want to make sure he got it and to see if he's coming. All right, it could be something as simple as that. Now, that gatekeeper is probably going to put you on hold and ask, go to the person who is the decision maker and say, I've got, Robin's on the phone from Technology Marketing Toolkit following up on a FedEx that she sent you. Now, if the FedEx was received, and of course everybody opens the FedEx or a U.S. priority mail envelope, and they got the letter, they might just take the call. They might be interested in what you're offering or the seminar. Now, if they're not, they might say, well, just put them through the voicemail. And of course, if you get voicemail, you leave a message. No big deal. The thing is, you just don't want to be rude to the gatekeeper. I'll give you an example. This week, we had somebody call in my office. Now, I've been advertising for a position in my company. So I'm looking for candidates. And this person called in and said, well, gave her name, and I won't give the name of the person, but gave her name, said, I'm calling for Robin. And of course, Kathy, who's answering the phone, said, well, can I ask what company you're with and what this is about? And she said, well, it's about a post on Facebook. And, and so Kathy said, okay, well, what company are you with? And she said, no, Robin will know. And she said, well, Kathy told her, she said, Robin always wants to know, I need to know who you are and the company and what you're calling about. And the woman said, well, is she in? Is she in the office right now? And Kathy's like, wait a minute, you're not even answering my questions and you're already asking me for things. And she said, well, she's in, but I need to know who you are and what you're calling about. And she said, no, she'll know who it is. And all this just set off red flags for Kathy, like left and right. So she knew right away that this person was a telemarketer calling in to sell something that I didn't know who they were, didn't have an appointment, because otherwise they wouldn't be so devious. They would just say who they are and what they're calling about. And because this person wouldn't do that, Kathy put the flag on them immediately and said, well, let me get your number. And then she said, well, can I get her personal cell phone? And Kathy then really was like, you know what, this is not somebody Robin knows, because if Robin really knew her, then she wouldn't be avoiding me and she would have her cell phone. So she said, look, I'm just going to take your name and number. And Kathy actually gave me her number, but told me all this about this person. And what's really ironic is if the person had just said who they were, what they were calling about, which was the position that we had advertised, I would have taken their call. But because they were trying to be all clever, because it was a sales position we were looking for, I think they were trying to show how clever they could be to get around a gatekeeper, that, they were rude to Kathy, and I'll never hire somebody like that. So don't think of a gatekeeper as somebody who is to be blocked, to screen and to kind of sneak around and everything like that. Be a professional. You're dealing with another professional. Now, of course, there's going to be gatekeepers that are going to be rude. There's going to be prospects that are going to be rude. I mean, there's rude people in the world. Don't let that bother you. Be the professional. As the movie goes, Ron Burgundy would say, stay classy, San Diego. So don't you be the unprofessional one. Be professional, be upfront. That's why I like sending marketing in advance, because it gives you a reason to make the phone call. And if the prospect's interested because the FedEx or the letter or whatever did the job it was supposed to do, they will take your call. Not everybody, because not everybody wants what you're buying right now. I don't care how good your marketing is. If somebody is just not interested right now, they're just not interested right now. All marketing is like that. You're fishing for that prospect. So don't try and be cute or clever or sneaky, because, any relationship that starts out that way is not a good thing. You don't want to trick your prospects into talking to you. You want them to come to you because they're genuinely interested in what you have to offer. And that's why the marketing needs to set that call up so that they want to take that call. They want to talk to you. And if your marketing is done right, Prospects that are interested, they're going to want to talk to you. So don't try and be sneaky or anything like that. Just be a professional, be straightforward, be simple, and be straight to the point. In fact, if they offer voicemail, which you'll get quite often, just take it and leave a message there. If they offer to take the message live, just keep it simple. Say, well, just let them know this is Robin. Robin's from Technology Marketing Toolkit. I was calling to follow up on a FedEx letter I sent him last week, and I wanted to know if he received that letter and wanted to know what he wanted to do. So that way you're not getting into too many details, not who you are, what you don't have to get into that because you're just leaving a voicemail or a message with the gatekeeper who answered the phone. And he can reach me at this number, and my email is this if he prefers just to shoot me an email and just let me know what he wants to do regarding the letter I sent him. Very simple, very straightforward. Again, don't try to be sneaky or avoid answering questions. It only raises red flags, and it's insulting to the person that you're talking to. So if they're like, all right, what are you selling? So, well, I'm not selling anything. I'm following up on a letter that we sent. I can send you a copy, Mrs. Jones or whoever's answering the phone if you prefer, and you can email it to them. I don't know if we can help him or not, or I was calling to invite him to a seminar. I can send you that invitation if you like. If he's not interested, that's fine. I won't bother him. That's all you're trying to do is find out if there's interest. So again, if they get aggravated, if they get rude, don't let that be a reason for you to be rude. Just be straightforward and stand on the power of the marketing message that you sent in. Okay, handling rejection. If someone says they're not interested, they aren't interested. I've been in sales my whole life, and there's all these clever comebacks for someone who says they're not interested. Personally, I don't recommend trying to keep someone on the phone to convince them otherwise. You can offer to send them more information. Say, hey, okay, cool, I get it. Great, I'm glad you have a great relationship with your current IT person. Let me shoot you over this free report or send you some more information. Because if someone's not interested and you try and twist their arm and use these clever ways of keeping them on the phone and getting them interested, you might be able to get a few more, but just the aggravation and the people you're going to annoy doing it, just be respectful, because hopefully you're trying to build a relationship with this person. You want to call them again. You want them to call you if they get to a point where they're ready to buy. So don't be annoying. And if they aren't interested, that doesn't mean you should stop marketing to them altogether. Just remove them from that particular promotion. So if you are promoting via telemarketing a seminar and they say they're not interested, then great. Next month when you have a free report or a new video or something like that, you can call back. There's nothing wrong with that. And just, again, do that. And if they say they're not interested, again, it doesn't mean you stop marketing to them altogether. Now, of course, if they say, take my name off this list and don't call me, then you should be respectful of that and take them off the list and don't call them. Now, you could still mail them. Most people don't get annoyed if you mail them things. It's the things that kind of irritate them, or send them too many emails or emails they never asked for, or calling them. Those tend to annoy people, but direct mail doesn't seem to annoy people as much. So then that's why you would have to rely on direct mail or referrals or other ways of getting into that person. And again, if they ask to be removed from the list, you should remove them from your list. And if someone is abrupt and hangs up on you, don't disqualify them too quickly. You may just have caught them at a really, really bad time. Use your judgment. I've even had one of my salespeople call a prospect who had requested information from us. And the guy got really rude and he hung up on my sales guy. And my sales guy wasn't deterred. He called him back. He said, hey, I'm sorry. It seems like we got disconnected. I just wanted to follow up and see if you really were interested in XYZ or whatever. It was very polite, very professional. And the guy actually said, yeah, I guess we got disconnected. He said, yeah, send me some information. And he ended up buying in the end. So sometimes if someone's rude, you may have just caught him at a bad time. Again, stay classy, San Diego. Don't let it rattle you. Just move on. Be the professional. You got to remember, this is a numbers game. You're not going to get every single person to buy or be interested in what you sell. So don't worry about it. Just move on to the next. So what should you do right now? Well, first of all, consider adding telemarketing, obviously, to follow up on all the marketing campaigns you're sending out, including leads from networking events and trade shows, direct mail, LinkedIn connections, people who are liking you on Facebook, that sort of thing. If you add telemarketing to that marketing mix, you're going to elevate and increase the responsiveness and the return on every marketing campaign when it's added on correctly. Also, check out the vendor directory for telemarketing companies our members use and their ratings. Not only will you find out who to use, but you'll find out who not to use, because you'll see some companies up there have some negative reviews, and we've left them up there just so when you go up, if you're thinking about hiring one of them, you can see that there are companies that don't do a good job. And I think that's every bit as valuable to know as the ones to call who will do a good job. Also, there's a report with this session called Turning Cold Calls into Hot Prospects. And it's an approach I use for securing appointments. I used it personally years ago to get through to decision makers. It's based on niche marketing and client case studies. And it's all about the approach where you're calling them to get a case study in their hand about how you helped one of their peers get a certain result. And it worked really, really well for me to not only get through to the gatekeeper, but also to get those appointments. So what I would do is, like, one, for example, one that comes to mind is we had helped a computer training school literally take their seat fill rate, meaning they were selling seats in training classes, and they were selling maybe only about 50% of the seats that they had. So half their classroom was empty, and we got them up to 80-90% capacity on every single class, and we were using online email marketing and web marketing and so forth. So then what I did is I put that into a case study, and I called every single other computer training school in the country, offering to send them this case study of how we helped this computer training school take their fill rates from, I think, 50% to 80-90%. It was something like that. It's been a while. It's been over a decade since I did this, but it was something to that result that I knew a lot of training schools wanted. And I offered that up in a free educational case study, which got me in the door and got me talking to people. And it was great for getting appointments, positioning myself properly. So that's attached along with this session. So if you get a chance, read that report, and you can read about that approach that I took. So again, I hope you start using telemarketing. It is a more sophisticated marketing strategy. And so, add it when you're ready to add it, but it's another way for you to generate leads, clean a list, build a list, get appointments, and grow your business. So again, if you have questions, get on the Q&A call or get on the queue itself, and we're always here to help you.